Yeah, Hormina, and wow, have we got a bumper special episode today. It's Capcom versus Konami, round 1 on the Super Famicom. Who will be crowned the winner in this fight of the ages? And I'm not going to be alone in this episode either.
Hey folks, I've been really looking forward to this one.
And I'm back as well. Long time no see, everybody. I've been keeping up with Saki and Kaito's contributions on the channel the last couple of months. Man, seems like Saki had to endure a game worthy of the channel's name the last time around.
Oh yeah, Mystery Hospital. The less said about that one, the better.
Yeah, that looked grim, man. But hey, I've got 5 awesome Konami games here, and we all know they were the best studio for the Super Famicom.
Well, they were, except for Capcom. They were even better.
How can you say that? Did Capcom release Super Castlevania 4 or Parodius for the Super Famicom? Of course not. Konami wins.
Dude, take off the bunny hat. It's blinding you. Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Area 88, obviously Capcom is better.
Okay, boys, save it for the reviews. This is what we're going to do. There are going to be 5 categories, and you can put one Capcom game against a Konami game of the same type. Argue the case for it, and then I'll judge who wins, Capcom or Konami, in that round.
How come you get to decide?
Yeah, what's with that?
Well, I like both Capcom and Konami, so that makes me sorta impartial?
Well, okay, but only because I'm itching to play these games.
Great. Well, so my first game is Golf for the Famicom.
Kaito, that is not a Konami game, and nor is it for the Super Famicom.
I was only joking. I know this is just for the Super Famicom.
Actually, that's a good point. Let's clarify the rules of this battle. We are only looking at Super Famicom releases from Capcom and Konami. The Super Famicom was the Japanese Super Nintendo, and also we are looking at the Japanese releases of each game, and I can see that there is at least one game that wasn't released in North America. So it's Hisao arguing the case for Capcom and Kaito for Konami. Are you guys ready?
Hell yeah, Saki, let's do this.
Bring it on, Hisao. This one's in the bag for me.
Okay, so first up is the shoot 'em ups or shmups category. Let's get to the games.
Area 88 is a game based after the manga of the same name, where Shin Kazama and others are fighting for a private military organisation as mercenaries and trying to raise enough money from their work to buy their way out of their contracts. This makes so much more sense than what the game was called in the West, UN Squadron. I'm not sure who thought that name up, but clearly someone who had no idea what the source material was about. Anyway, this is a horizontally scrolling shoot 'em up, nominally based on the arcade, but improved in many ways. One reason that I think Saki should judge Capcom the winner in this round is that there are various missions which are to a degree selectable, but attacks on the Area 88 base will enforce certain battles. Outside of the standard stages in deserts, the jungle and the sea and so forth, there are also bombing runs which will give you an easy opportunity to earn some cash. As you accrue money even from failing in missions, you can purchase new planes and with that, compatible special weapons. This gives the game a certain open-ended nature where you can create your own difficulty. Unique to Area 88 is how your life works. You're given a life bar, but if you're hit, you are temporarily put into a risk state where one more hit will kill you. But if you survive this state for a number of seconds, you will be restored but with a slight dent to your life bar overall. When the life bar reaches empty from taking too many attacks, then you'll lose your life. For a shmup, Area 88 has a huge amount of depth and variety. The presentation is top notch, especially for an early release on the system, and its settings remind me in a small way of Metal Slug. The soundtrack isn't everybody's favourite, but I personally find it okay, and the slowdown does occur, but it's infrequent. It's a tough game with 3 continues by default, but a hugely satisfying game, and the stages aren't too long and are capped off with a boss or enemy-based destruction battle at the end of the stage. The Super Famicom is the only place you can play this version of the game, as the European ports on the home computers are of the arcade itself. Overall, this is a standout title that has aged very well indeed.
As you can tell, I love whimsy. For those of you not familiar with the series, Parodius, as the name suggests, is a parody of Konami's Gradius and includes references to other Konami games within its stages. It's a horizontally scrolling shoot 'em up with a linear progression from stage to stage, with boss encounters along the way. At the start or after continuing, you can choose from 4 craft, each with different weapon and defense properties. Personally, I always get on better with the standard Vic Viper, but you can switch it up after continuing to see what works best for you. Rather than regurgitating the power-up system mechanics, the basic play is that by shooting down some enemies, you'll progress an upgrade bar through various weapon and outfit changes, allowing missiles, drone ships, enhanced main weapons and more. On top of this, the bell system from Twinbee features where shooting the bells that appear on stages will open up special weapons and points bonuses. You can manually select the upgrades when the one that you want becomes accessible, or allow the game to do it automatically, but I personally don't recommend that. One clear reason why I think Parodius Dash should take Saki's judgment and win the round for Konami is that this is a 2-player compatible game, but Area 88 is a wimpy 1-player only game, and we all know that games are more fun played together. The stages are colourful, starting out in a space setting before progressing to various scenarios that parody the various Konami games from Gradius, Life Force, Salamander and so much more. Along with this is a wonderful soundtrack that errs a little bit on the silly side, which complements the game greatly. The game has unlimited continues, so it's possible to brute your way through the game, but it gets much harder to beat progress at certain points, because if you die on the stage you will lose all of your power-ups and we return to being a pea-shooting slowpoke at the most recent stage waypoint. Overall, this is a fantastic shooter for the system and doesn't suffer this gameplay slowdown to the extent that Konami's Gradius 3 did. It's a fairly tough game, but it's an extremely fun playthrough for sure.
Super Famicom 用ソフトエリア88好評発売中。
Capcom.
Parodies. Parodies.
Huh? 何やって？
お茶目スーパーファミコンパロディウスだ
Konami.
Well, they're both great games, and I agree they both deserve 4 stars out of 5, but I have to choose a winner, and in this instance... I rule that Area 88 is the winner from Capcom. Parodius Die is a fantastic game, but Area 88 or UN Squadron on the Super Famicom is a unique experience that you just can't get anywhere else, and has a gameplay system that is rarely mimicked. With Parodius Die, you have a great game, but it's not unique amongst its peers. It just does what it does very well. But in Area 88, it has such a unique attack system, stage progression, and variety afforded throughout its various aircraft and weapon loadouts that it wins the shoot 'em up round for Capcom.
Instead of regurgitating what every reviewer will tell you about this game, I will sum up Final Fight on the Super Famicom as this: a compromised but still very fun port of this arcade classic beat-em-up. As a single player only port of this game, it does lack some of the fullness of the arcade experience. Instead, I want to focus on the arc in the case for Capcom and this game for Saki's judgment by saying that I think there is too much focus on having the very best port of something and negating perfectly decent experiences out there. Everyone will tell you that the Mega Sega CD version is better of this game, and it is, but it doesn't mean there isn't any fun that can be had in other versions, and this one does have a lot of fun in it. I think if you picked up the controller and started playing this version, and if you like this type of game, you'll soon be having fun even though this version lacks Guy as a playable character. In addition, as most know, this port lacks a stage, but arguably that was the most annoying stage anyway, and a lengthy game for a single player playthrough is plenty long enough. And yes, there are fewer enemies on screen at a time, but the arcade games are mostly designed to keep you feeding your hard-earned cash into them, and there are enough brutally difficult games out there already. What if having a decent challenging game but is definitely beatable was enough? That's how I feel about this version of Final Fight, and the sound effects pack a real punch, and the soundtrack is pretty classic stuff these days. Between stages you'll have bonus rounds of smashing up a car and some panes of glass, and the Japanese version of this game has the uncensored characters and names. Overall, I think that this one does take a beating for its deficiencies, but it's still a fun game. I didn't beat it this time around on this playthrough. I regard it as a tough boss at the end of what is the game's 4th stage, but I have in the past a few times, and it's always satisfying to finish.
Konami's Batman Returns is the best game bearing this movie's title, bar none. A single-player beat-em-up with a variety in its stages and a very satisfying set of mechanics that doesn't outstay its welcome, like some beat-em-ups can. I do agree with what Hisao is saying about Final Fight on the Super Famicom, as it's by no means the worst port, but I still think Konami did a better job with Batman Returns. The basic mechanics are more fun in this game. You can easily chokehold enemies, including punching them whilst grasping them, throw them against the scenery or the floor, and even grab two enemies at the same time and knock their heads together. Very satisfying. In addition, there is a desperation move that is very powerful but knocks a little of your health bar down, various jump attacks, and special pickups along with a blocking move that makes for some fairly varied fighting tactics. You're also equipped with two tools, the Batarang and the Spear Gun, but on some stages the latter is not available. Finally, picking up test tubes gives you a projectile to hurl to freeze enemies on the screen. On top of all this, some stages are more than the standard beat-em-up stages, with some platforming, and one stage even seeing you drive the Batmobile. This is a pretty tough game on its standard difficulty, but it is doable. But both Catwoman and the Penguin fights are really tough and require you to have mastered the controls to see them off in what will be a 7-stage game. Most stages are split up into different sections, which if you should forfeit a continue, you'll start from the nearest waypoint, rather than from the start of the stage like in Final Fight. Also, the soundtrack is just amazing in this game, capturing the atmosphere perfectly, and the presentation is often top-notch, peak Konami. Overall, this is a slightly overlooked beat-em-up for the Super Famicom, and I think Saki deserves to judge this one as being a little bit special, as you can't play it anywhere else. Although, I did hear a Mega Drive port is incoming any day now.
Super Famicom で好評発売中 Capcom.
Crime is on the rise, and once again, violence appeared in the streets of the city. Here now is an off reach of the events that took place earlier this evening. The Commissioner's Office advises...ついに登場、ファイティングゲームの決定版、スーパーファミコン版、バットマンリターンズ。
I hear you, Hisao. Some people spend a bit too much time obsessing over which is the best version of a game, discounting some perfectly decently experiences elsewhere that can still be fun. And of course, the arcade version is now easily playable. Final Fight is a very early Super Famicom release, in fact 1990 in Japan. But I still think that in this case, Konami wins around with Batman Returns, packing top-notch presentation, varied fighting mechanics and amazing sound design. It's the winner. Whilst I feel some of the variety is good in this game, some of the execution of their stage prevent this game from being great. Neither are the best beat-em-up on the Super Famicom, but in this case, Batman Returns wins the round for Konami. It's even as we enter the third round.
Pretty much everyone knows about the Aladdin game released on the Super Famicom being different from the arguably more well-known Sega Mega Drive version, with this particular version coming from Capcom. No strangers to Disney, Capcom over the years have been responsible for some of the most memorable Disney franchises, making it over successfully into video game form, and Aladdin was no exception. This is a thoroughly solid, is somewhat varied but not overly difficult platformer from the early 90s. Arguably more faithful to the source material, with Aladdin not wielding a sword but instead making do with stomps to the head to knock out enemies and apples to momentarily daze them. The platforming is largely very fair and varied, with a certain skill to timing your jumps, swings and vaults as the stages progress. Along the way you will pick up a sheet to slow your falls and open up bonuses and extra lives, as well as easing up the difficulty. Also, collecting enough gems expands your life bar, and bonus rounds can be earned during the stages, which you can vie for a chance to restore your health or extra lives. The presentation is top-notch, colourful and vibrant, and feels very much like you're playing a cartoon, especially when played on a small portable CRT television. This is complemented by good sound effects and a very good soundtrack. Overall, whilst this doesn't bring too much new to the table, it's a solid and enjoyable game, with some sections which will have you tearing your hair out at how stupid you were to fluff a jump, but largely I would say it's fair. Capcom arguably made some of the best Disney games, and this is no exception, and it's still a very appealing game to play to this day.
Konami were the kings of platform games, and Bust to Bust Loose is an underappreciated platformer that mixes up the play across 6 zones that mirror the look of the Warner Brothers animation perfectly. You play as Buster, who needs to bounce, leap and sprint across the Wild West, a haunted house, the Looniversity and much more besides, including varied bonus stages at the end of each stage. The play mechanics are slightly different to many platformers, whereby a standard jump and bump to the head of your enemies will result in health damage, but doing a foot stomp will take them out. These 2 moves can be combined to extend your range. Alongside this, Buster's sprint mechanic is integral to the game to ascend vertical surfaces and make huge leaps of faith, which is possibly also the game's weak point, as sometimes these jumps can be frustrating to pull off in time correctly, but once you learn the stage, they become very predictable. Each stage is topped off with a boss fight or a stage finale, such as taking out a runaway train, fighting Frankenstein's monster, or calming Dizzy down by bouncing food into his mouth. It's very varied and beautifully presented. There are a few moments of frustration, with the enemies constantly knocking you back, but this doesn't happen too often, and having the right momentum will see you through these tough spots. Graphically, the game is a treat, and the characters are all beautifully drawn and represents Konami doing great work in the 16-bit era, and the soundtrack is pleasant enough, it's not that remarkable. Overall, this is a very enjoyable platformer that shouldn't be overlooked.
Super Famicom Aladdin ただいま発売中。
Capcom.
お待たせしました。ダッシュがすごい。スーパーファミコン版タイニートゥーンアドベンチャーズ。
Konami.
Oh man, this is probably the hardest category to judge, as in many ways both of these games fall squarely in a good rating, and I agree a lot with what Hisao and Kaito has to say. I will say though that the American football stage of Tiny Toon Adventures is just annoying, whereas Aladdin doesn't ever drop off from being good. I enjoyed both of these games, having beaten them both, and I generally preferred the boss fights in Tiny Toon Adventures. But I do give the nod to Aladdin on this round. It's just that little bit more tight on the platforming, and you can really build some momentum with all of Aladdin's vaulting, jumping and leaping, which is very satisfying, whereas Buster has a bit more of a Sonic feel to it when he's sped up, and that feels a bit more like set pieces than a test of skill. It's now 2 to Capcom, 1 to Konami, and we're moving into the action platformers next. It's hotting up.
If I was to name a game series that is in equal measure frustrating as it's fun, it's the Ghosts and Goblins series, and the Super Ghouls and Ghosts entry in the Super Famicom is no exception. You will curse this game at the same time as having the urge to give it just one more go, and when you do defeat a section or a stage, most people really enjoy it. Thankfully, this outing includes a difficulty setting and enables you to set the number of lives per continue up to a maximum of 6 of those. You play as Arthur out to rescue Prince Guinevere from Emperor Sadius, or Samael as he is known in the Japanese version. On completing the game for the first time around, you'll be prompted to start all over again, as you lack the goddess bracelet needed for taking down Samael. Along the way, you'll face off against all types of ghouls, ghosts and underworld inhabitants across varied and beautifully illustrated stages. The biggest problem with this game for those with average gameplay skills is that it's pretty unrelenting even on beginner level and doesn't give any ground even from the start, requiring you to memorise enemy spawn points, projectile ranges and other dangers. For those who struggle with more difficult games, this one might prove to be not that much fun, but for those who like a challenge, this game has an amazing challenge for those of you who can rise to it, and it's a greatly rewarding challenge with some of the best early graphics on the system that I think will still hold up on some 32-bit systems, along with its iconic soundtrack. A little bit of slowdown does affect the game, but not enough to seriously dent the game, and some would argue that the slowdown helps you. I personally don't agree with that, but your mileage may vary. Overall, this is a great game for the Super Famicom, and for those who want a real challenge, Super Ghouls and Ghosts provides it in spades, and unlike so many games, its allure will always be there, and you'll come back to it time and time and time again.
Talking of games that you will come back to again and again is Super Castlevania 4, or Akumajo Dracula as it was called in Japan. It is one of Konami's many reworkings of the original game, with some changes to the gameplay and stage setup, but ultimately you are Simon Belmont and out to kick Dracula's ass again. This outing is a little bit more forgiving, especially because Simon's whip can be lashed out at an angle, up in the air, dangled in front of him, and even below him when jumping, as well as straight forwards. This gives so much power and flexibility in a basic attack that it does make the game a little easier. It also enables the terrain traversal to be mixed up with hoops that you need to latch onto with your whip to cross the gaps in the stages. The graphical presentation is rich and lush, being one of the best looking games on the system, even for a relatively early release. And then comes the music. Oh man, the musical score in this game is incredible, even at times coming across as being improv, which is quite a brave compositional step, but it fits the game like a glove. How they fit all of this into an 8-meg cartridge is beyond me. Alongside Simon's whip, you could equip special weapons from the dagger, axe, holy water and much more, which increase his firepower and range and can be very effective against bosses, although limited by the amount of hearts that you collect during the stage. Another series staple is the bonuses hidden behind destructible blocks, giving you weapons, meat to restore health and sometimes power-ups to your secondary weapon. Across the game is the Super Famicom's famous rotational scaling effects known as Mode 7, which are put to good use, and OG occasionally slows down the gameplay, but mostly it remains fluid and a joy to play throughout. Some people say that this Castlevania outing is a little bit too much on the easy side, but I prefer to think of it as an accessible game, especially as the password option means you can play this game in bite-sized chunks. Overall, this is absolutely, without shadow of a doubt, an all-time great, and a very deserved 5 stars out of 5 stars.
Konami.
いでよ超魔界村スーパーファミコンで10月4日出現
Hisao makes such a great argument for Super Ghouls and Ghosts, and he is bang on. I love this game even though I spend most of my time when playing it shouting excuses at the TV, blaming everything but my own skills. But Super Castlevania 4 is just epic. I love everything about this game. It's linear unlike some of the Castlevanias, but it is endlessly replayable, and the musical score is amazing. I have to give this one to Konami, but Super Ghouls and Ghosts is no slouch. It's neck and neck, and we have one round remaining. Who's going to take the crown? Only one can, and it's going to have to be a knockout for this next round.
I would argue Capcom's Street Fighter II series and its related games is one of the most confusing series to remember all the different variations of the games and its names, but the second release on the Super Famicom, Street Fighter II Turbo Hyper Fighting, to give its full name, is in my book a stone cold all-time classic. Lacking some of the finesse of the later games with special bars, the extended roster from Super, and fewer options overall, this version of the game represents the pure experience in the home on a 16-bit console, showing just how much of a revelation Street Fighter II was in a day. You literally could not go anywhere without both seeing and feeling the hype on this game. This version ups the speed from the original release, leading to its turbo moniker, and extends the moveset on some characters such as Chun-Li, gaining her fireball in this version. The stages all reflect the classic stages and still look amazing on the Super Famicom. Sure, some of the frames of animation are missing in this game and it doesn't fill the screen entirely, but the action is smooth and doesn't slow down. The beauty of this genre is in its two-player mode. When both players love the genre, this is an endlessly playable game that holds up without fault to this day. The stage music and voices are great, if lacking a little of the punch, metallic twang and aggression of the arcade, and the visuals are still a feast for the eyes. You can also play the original championship rules in this version of the game and alter the turbo speed of the turbo version, which is the version to play in my book. Street Fighter II Turbo Hyper Fighting on the Super Famicom took a great port of the original Street Fighter II for the system and turned it into a legendary piece of silicon that is always great to play through. Ryu is just such a solid character to play as, and nothing is more satisfying than a dragon punch to take down your opponents to end the bout. Out of the Super Famicom's 4 Street Fighter outings, this is arguably the best, though I have a massive amount of respect for the 0-2 port that came 3 years later.
I think TMNT Mutant Warriors, or Tournament Fighters as it was called outside of Japan, is somewhat underappreciated on the Super Famicom. It's a very decent one-on-one fighter, but when looking across the whole landscape of such fighters across all platforms, I can only rate it as good. But it does have some advantages to the Street Fighter II series, with some of its simpler controls. There are only 2 levels of punches and kicks in this game, which are all mapped to the face buttons, meaning no shoulder buttons are used, and a special meter makes an appearance here, allowing your fighter of choice to unleash a devastating attack, which is not that hard to do when the meter is charged up. Against a friend, you can set a handicap, meaning they get a fair crack at the whip, and overall, its simpler controls make this one more instantly fun to play, with some of the special attacks that are easy to pull off using Street Fighter II style inputs. Against the CPU, you're probably going to get your ass handed to you even on the standard difficulty to start with, but that does challenge you to improve your guarding and work out what each opponent is weak to. The enemy AI is actually quite clever. You may win one round with a certain attacking style, but in the next round, the opponent learns from that and closes off that window of opportunity. Presentationally, this game holds up really well with vibrant colours, nicely animated characters, and no slowdown present, having all of the Konami polish that you would expect. Sound-wise, the sound effects are great, with lots of nice voices, and musically it's decent, but not quite peak Konami. In addition, the game features a basic turbo mode to help speed up the fighting. Also, as this is the Rubbish Heap, the Japanese version is the best version of this game, as it tweaks some of the gameplay and has features such as a second palette version of each fighter that is absent in the non-Japanese releases. We'll talk about this in more detail in the future in a full review. Overall, this is still an overlooked fighter for the Super Famicom, but oh man, it's not fair going up against SF2 Turbo. That is such a good game. I've got to hand it to Hisao for choosing that game. I love it too, but I really think you should give this Turtles game a go.
どこまで強くなるのか。ストリートファイター2ターボスーパーファミコンで発売中。
Capcom.
Oh, this one is easy for me. Sorry, Kaito. Street Fighter II Turbo Hyper Fighting is indeed, as Hisao says, a stone-cold classic on the Super Famicom. I personally can't fault it. Maybe if it was a bigger cartridge, we'd have a few more frames of animation or higher quality voices. But in 1993, a 20 megabit cartridge was just epic. I have to hand it to TMNT Mutant Warriors, or Tournament Fighters as it was known outside of Japan though, as it is a game that actually has quite a lot going for it and is very enjoyable. It's also probably the best one-on-one fighter Konami made. The specials are a little bit easier to pull off and the simpler punch stroke kick options do have merit. Don't bother with Tournament Fighters on the Mega Drive or NES though, it's really not that great. But on the Super Famicom, it's well worth a shot. That said though, I am itching to play SF2 Turbo right now. My fighter choice will always be Chun-Li, and the fact she has a fireball in this version, hell yeah. So there we have it. This time, Capcom beats Konami 3-2 in this epic battle of these two legendary games houses on the Super Famicom. I feel bad for Konami though. They have, along with Capcom, released some of the best games on the Super Famicom, and there is so much more from both of these developers that came out for the system that I'm sure we'll be back for in round 2 of this battle. But on this occasion, the winner is Capcom. Adding up the stars, Konami received 18 out of 25 possible stars, and Capcom was just ahead on 19. Underlining just how close and fierce a battle this really was. At some point in the future, we will look at these games more closely in their own episodes on the Rubbish Heap, looking at the Japanese versions of these games and how accessible they are to non-Japanese speakers, which I'm sure Hisao and Kaito would be more than happy to help out with.
Definitely, sign me up.
Hell yeah, you don't even need to ask me whether I want to play some of the best video games ever made.
Well, the three of us are going to close out this special episode. I want to wish all of our viewers a very rad holiday season, whatever it might be, wherever you are celebrating, and whatever you're celebrating or not. We want to thank you for joining us on our first partial year on YouTube. We have so much coming for next year, and we're so stoked to share it with all of you. And we'll be back in 2 weeks' time, just after the new year.
We need to get some Famicom and PC Engine games on soon as well.
Oh yeah, man, now we're talking. Let's get some Famicom in here, and MSX as well.
Hisao, dude, I literally know nothing about the MSX. That promises to be so interesting. Anyway, from us at the Rubbish Heap, thank you so much. Hey guys, fancy a little post-episode gaming session?
Definitely.
And I've got some ice-cold drinks in the fridge to crack open.
See you soon, everyone.
Let's play Final Fight first.
Saki, it's single player only?
Oh, and Capcom won this battle? As always, like, subscribe and all of that shit, and also check out this rad Rubbish Heap merch, available worldwide on Redbubble and Amazon. See the links below for how to purchase. I've been Saki Endo, and this has been a Rubbish Heap. Ja ne ne!